Greetings, pen pals. We have a variant on an old friend here today. So this is the TWSBI Vac 700R in a brand new finish, which is called Iris, which is really, really pretty. So rather than look at this relatively ordinary cardboard box that it comes in, let's crack it open. So we have an instruction manual. It's a vac filling pen, so the instruction manual is important for some people. A little bit of padding here, and then we get to the actual box, which is nestled in some more foam. So they do pack this pretty nicely. We can set this aside, get to the actual pen. It's packaged in this very nice clear box, suitable for gifting, and they present it. It's sort of on its own little pedestal in here, which is really quite nice, etc. So we're going to open this up. The pen is held down by these little clips, and then we can take the pen away. Before we get rid of the box, though, I will point something out. Don't just toss this box, because sort of hidden under the base here is some important stuff that you will not need right away, but you will need in the future. There's a TWSBI wrench, which you will need for disassembling, some extra O-rings, and some silicone grease. You won't need any of these things initially, but eventually when you want to do some maintenance on the pen, you will certainly need the wrench. You may need the O-rings. The silicone grease is ordinary silicone grease. You can get that anywhere, but it is nice that they provide that, and so don't just toss the box, even though it's a nice box and you probably want to keep it, but those parts are important and they are kind of hidden under there. So there you go. So here we go. This is the TWSBI Vac 700R in the Iris finish. So just to give you an example, this is an ordinary TWSBI Vac 700R. It's sort of just plain a chrome trim. What we have here is sort of a flamed look to it. So we have the clip, we have the clip band, we have the cap band, and we have the trim ring on the piston turning knob have all been given the flame treatment. But that's not all. If we open it up, we see that the nib itself has been given the flame treatment, as well as this metal insert piece in the section. So pretty much any piece of exposed metal has been given that treatment. The vac filling rod itself has not, but that's going to be sitting in the ink most of the time anyway, so not much of a point to that. So pretty much anything that you reasonably can expect that's metal, that's exposed, that could be flamed, is flamed, which is really nice. So you get sort of this purplish, bluish, greenish, multicolor flame effect, which is really, really attractive. In addition, another difference between it and a standard off-the-shelf Vac 700R is the piston turning knob is clear here as opposed to the black one. It's a decently hefty pen, weighs in at 34 grams. Size-wise, it is no slouch either. Here it is compared to a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan. As you can see, it is a little bit longer than either of these. In terms of capping, it is a twist to uncap. It takes 1.5 turns to open, and it does not really post. You can kind of stick the cap on the end, but it doesn't really stay on. So this pen, you really have to classify this as a non-posting pen. The cap is very nice. It has a liner, and I could tell you from experience using this other one for quite a few years already that this liner is very, very effective. It mates against the end of the section, and it does keep the pen from drying out. So it does work quite well in that regard. So this is, let's go through the parts here. So around the cap band, it says TWSBI, and then Vac 700R, and then Taiwan. The clip is just a really, really nice clip. Same style clip here. This one has a matte finish on the clip, and again, that whole flame effect carries through all the way to the clip band and all the way to the top, and then it terminates in a top finial, which has the TWSBI logo rendered really, really nicely with sort of inset inside a transparent kind of button. Looks very, very nice. The section itself is a really nice section. Again, the inset metal piece has been given that flame effect as well, and the nib has been given the flame effect. So it's a really nice TWSBI nib, number 6 size nib. Has some scroll work. It says TWSBI and then a B for broad, and it has the TWSBI logo. And it has a uninspiring plastic feed. Like we said, this pen is a vac filler. You can open this up, and we're going to go through the filling in a minute, but you basically pull this back, you submerge it in the ink, you build up vacuum pressure inside. When the piston gets to the end of the travel, the channel will widen to release the vacuum pressure and then cause ink to rush up into the pen. We'll see that when we fill it. You can completely disassemble these very nicely. They have these flat parts here, but you will need that TWSBI wrench that is included with the pen for disassembly. And disassembling like these, like I said, is actually a fairly simple process, not that hard at all. This is a very popular pen, the Vac 700R. Like I said, I've had this other one, this sort of just plain one, for a few years. I really like it quite a bit. This one is in fine. I got this one in broad, so in addition to doing the writing sample, we'll actually do a comparison of the fine nib versus the broad nib, so you can see the difference in the fine versus the broad TWSBI nib. But that is our Vac 700R in this super, super nice iris finish, which looks really, really good. This sort of purplish color here reminds me of a sheening ink. So there's a lot of inks that have this sheening purplish pinkish cast over them. So I thought that would be appropriate. So we're going to be using an ink from Organic Studio. We're going to use Ralph Waldo Emerson Twilight Blue is what we will be inking it up with. And in terms of inking it up, let's get to that right now. Okay, so in terms of inking up, this process is going to be virtually identical for almost any vac filling pen. So what you're going to do is you're going to unturn the cap to free up the filling mechanism. You're going to draw it back. Don't immerse it in the ink and then draw it back. This isn't a draw filler, it's a vacuum filler. It fills at the end of the downstroke, so there's no point to immersing it and then pulling it back. So we're going to immerse it, we're going to pull it back, then we're going to immerse it in the ink. Now normally you would just do this straight up and down. I'm going to tilt this slightly just so we can get a better view for the camera here, but we're going to slowly push it down. What's going to happen is when this gets to the end of the stroke, the vacuum will be released, the air will pressure will be released, and the ink will be allowed to sort of rush into the pen. So there we go. That is the fill. We got about a halfway fill of ink. This is a pretty good amount of ink by almost any standard. Now, I'm going to show you a procedure that you can do, again, on almost any vac filling pen that allow you to get even more, sometimes nearly 100% fill. Again, it's purely optional, not necessary at all. What you're going to do is you're going to hold the pen vertically, and again, should be completely vertical. But for purposes of this video, I'm going to tilt it a little bit, just a little. So you're going to want to then push it up until that column of air basically disappears. You want to basically get rid of as much of the air in the pen as you possibly can. So what we're essentially doing is replacing the air with ink effectively. So when you get to the point where that column of air is pretty much gone, what you're going to want to do in that case is invert the pen, put it back in, and then push it down the rest of the way. Now when we do that, if you notice, we got even more ink in. In this case, we're probably up to northwards of 80% of the ink chamber filled with ink. So that is really a lot of ink, and that's certainly going to be good enough for our purposes here. So that'll pretty much do it for filling the pen. One thing I will remind you with these vac fillers and these TWSBIs is they have a shut-off valve mechanism. So effectively, when this is screwed all the way down, the ink chamber and the section are sealed off. That filler rod makes a seal between the ink chamber and the piston. This is great when you're traveling or flying with a pen, etc. But if you're writing for an extended period of time, you're going to want to open this up and allow that channel to open so the ink can flow. The amount of ink that'll be in the section is actually quite a bit. So for any kind of normal length writing session, you could just simply open it up, let the ink get into the section, and then you could close it right back up again if you so choose. It's really up to you whether you want to just leave it open or open it and close it, etc. But it does have that shut-off valve. Some people don't like that. I personally do kind of like it, so there you go. So anyway, that is our TWSBI Vac 700R, and that's how you fill it. But as we already said, pens are meant to write, and of course you do want to see how this pen writes, and I'm going to show you that right now. Okay folks, what we're writing with here is a TWSBI Vac 700R, and this is in the Iris edition. And this has a number 6 steel nib in broad. And I will say this is not that broad. So I'm going to give you a little comparison here. So this was our Vac 700R in broad. I'm going to write now with one that I got a few years ago that's in fine. And we'll see the difference between the broad and the fine. Yeah, I'll write above it. So here we have TWSBI Vac 700R. So this one is in fine, and this one is in broad. I mean, the broad one is broader, but I would have expected this difference to be much more significant. If this is a fine, this to me looks more like a medium than a broad. So I would have expected this broad nib to be a bit broader. But given that, it writes well, it is smooth. It seems to have some good flow. No complaints there, etc. You know, writes well. I would have expected, as I would expect. It's a little on the dry side, I would say, but I think this ink is kind of a dryish ink, so I'm not going to fault it for that too much. But I would expect it to be a bit broader and maybe a tiny bit wetter. Speaking of fine, you know what would be really fine? If you guys could all please like, comment, share, and subscribe. That would just be fantastic and much appreciated. So anyway, that's about it for this particular pen. Really, really nice. I mean, I think, you know, Vac 700R is kind of a well-known pen, well-established, etc. If you like this sort of flamed iris finish, which I certainly do, and I really particularly like even the fact that they did it on the nib, which I think is great, then you're going to like this pen. So I think that's about it for this pen for this moment. Again, really, really nice. This finish is just really something. If it's your taste and what you like, then I think you'll, like I said, I think you'll definitely like the pen. Okay, stop right there. I used the Ralph Waldo Emerson Twilight Blue from Organic Studio in this pen for a few hours, and it really was not performing well. And I thought, I don't think it's the pen for whatever reason, and the ink is a fine ink. Sometimes certain inks and certain pens just do not work right together. That is something we as fountain pen enthusiasts have come to learn. So I was determined though to use a sheening ink in this pen because I think this pen just screams for a sheening ink. So I cleaned out the pen and I put in this ink, which is KWZ Sheen Machine, and it performs much, much, much better. So I'm effectively going to redo the writing sample and go over the ink a little bit with you with this KWZ Sheen Machine, because I think you should see both perspectives, how it wrote with one ink versus the other. The only difference is really the ink here. Let's get going, and we'll do ourselves a writing sample. So again, this pen is a TWSBI Vac 700R, and this is the iris version. And this has, as we said, a number 6 steel nib in broad. And this just seems to flow much better. It is wetter as well. Everything about the performance is better. So that other ink just really seems to me just not to be a particularly compatible ink for this pen, which does happen sometimes. Let's do the fine versus broad comparison again. So this is the number 6 nib in broad, and let's check our other pen that we've had for years out. And so this is the number 6 nib in fine. Now we're actually seeing what I would expect to be. This flow is so much better. It's actually behaving more like a broad should, and we're actually seeing the difference between the broad and the fine that you would really expect to see. So put a good compatible ink in the pen, and all is right with the universe, as they say. Oh, by the way, in case you're interested, this ink in this other Vac 700R that I have is TWSBI Royal Purple. Okay, so that's our difference between our fine and our broad nibs. And that's what this pen looks like when we write with it. So like I said, it's really just a question of before we just really didn't have a good compatible ink going on in that pen, which is, again, that I've seen that happen before. This is not the first time, and it will not be the last time that has happened. So that's that's about it for this TWSBI Vac 700R iris version. And with broad, again, I'm much happier. This is really an outstanding writing pen now, which is great, and I'm really happy with that. So let's move on, and let's talk about this KWZ Sheen Machine ink for a bit now. Okay, like we said, this ink is KWZ Sheen Machine. And this is a very high sheening ink, so this just has a lot of sheen. Let's take a look at the color card for this guy real quick. So this is a deeply saturated blue, and as you can see, it does sheen quite a bit. So there you go. This is the ink we did have in the pen. To compare, again, this is the Ralph Waldo Emerson Twilight Blue. I mean, the colors are actually quite comparable to each other. Not nearly as much sheen on the Twilight Blue. And if we want to compare it again to, say, the Krishna Pakazah, again, a very similar color with somewhere in between, say, the Organic Studio Twilight Blue and the Sheen Machine in terms of level of sheen. So if we had to order it, we'd say this one has probably the least of the three. The Pakazah probably has the second, and as you might expect, the Sheen Machine has the most. But again, very similar shades of blue going on here. So again, nicely sheening ink. I think it complements this pen really well. This is on Rhodia paper, which normally you don't get a ton of sheen on, but you can pick up a bit with the Sheen Machine even on the Rhodia paper. It does make a brief appearances, but if you really want to see how it sheens, let's take a look at it on Tomoe River paper. Okay, what we're writing with here is, as we said, is KWZ Sheen Machine. And this is just a really nice ink. It's a pretty nice shade of blue all by itself. The sheen notwithstanding. For something like this, you really want like a broader, wetter nib, like this is. Just to get the effect better. And you do need to give the ink a little bit of time to dry before the sheen really kind of presents itself. So we'll give that a couple minutes to dry, and then we'll see how the sheen presents itself. Okay, we've given this a few minutes to dry, and as you can see, the Sheen machine is fully active and engaged, and it's not even completely dry yet. You can actually see it's still even a little bit wet, and even now you're getting some really good amounts of sheen. And again, I just think this goes so well. These sheening inks in general, and this one actually in particular, goes just so well with this pen. That's why I was kind of really insistent on getting a sheening ink in here, because this is just, to me, the coloration on the pen just screams for one of these sheening inks. I think this really just pairs really nicely. So good end of a good story with a happy ending in terms of this pen. So you really, again, just a good little lesson here for everybody. Doesn't surprise me totally, because I've seen this happen a lot, but if you're a little bit new to fountain pens or haven't had this particular phenomenon happen to you, you get a new pen, you ink it up with one particular ink, and it just doesn't write well. Eliminate all the normal things, but then just try another ink. Sometimes certain inks and certain pens just don't jibe with each other. It just happens. Anyway, I think that will just about do it for this video for this week. I hope you enjoyed watching it, because I sure enjoyed making it. And as always, until we see each other again, have a great day. Bye-bye.